This broadcast of Cultural Caravan is paid for by Cultural Caravan Productions Incorporated.
Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special as we look at the events that took place on Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. Um, as you know, the nation, the world stood perplexed as a mob of people came into the Capitol, ransacked, took over. It was a insurrection that none of us will forget. But basically there was several questions that came out of it. But before I go on, I want to introduce you to a panel of brothers and sisters that will discuss with me the impact of such proceedings and to basically look at where we are as a nation. To my left, we're joined by Brother Raymond Dugue. He is the second Assistant President General of the UNIA ACL. Next to him is the member of the Cultural Caravan Board of Directors, Ms. Soraya Nickens. Next is Dr. James McIntosh. He is the co-chair of CMOTAP. And last but certainly not least is the chair of NACO, New York NACO, as well as the International African Arts Festival, Dr. Segun Shabaka. Welcome to Cultural Caravan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me get right to it. As you and I know, and many people across the city, across this nation, across the world, were stunned by the developments that took place on the day that there was a important basic ceremonial procedure of which every state came together to certify the election results with the presiding officer, the vice president over the proceedings, Mike Pence, in his role of the president of the Senate. It was an opportunity for those who had objections to state their objections, but basically everyone knew it was an opportunity to formally certify the election and that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, their nomination, and the fact that Joe Biden would be our next president. Unfortunately, things did not go as normal. And as you know, President Trump had a rally earlier that day, which stirred up a lot of his supporters who proceeded to approach the steps to go to the nation's capital and decide to turn things upside down. I just want to give you an opportunity. I'm going to start with Soraya to just tell us about your perception about what you saw, what happened on that day this week.
I saw total chaos and anarchy. I think that it was just uh, I think that what happened is that the President Trump's party have indulged him and with every little whim. And he actually, I heard parts of his speech that day. One of the channels had it. And I see why the people seem to want to listen to him, because he's very animated and engaging to the people listening to him, and actually rather humorous. But during the speech, he criticized a lot of people in his own party and said some negative things about them. So, what he did, and he also told these people to go to the Capitol, which they did. And where they just shoved their way in and created a lot of rioting and chaos. And when you look at this, to me, it's almost like a toddler who you've indulged and indulged and indulged and put no limits on, and they do something like this because they've been able to get away with things for so long, and then people are shocked. I mean, it is shocking what happened, but when you think about it in the whole scheme of things, the fact that all along it's come up to this, he won't give in to losing the election. He's constantly saying, "I'm going to stay in power. No, I'm going to take this to court. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." So this is just the culmination of all that.
Dr. McIntosh, you had been on a previous program where you talked about the actions of psychologists across the country, a duty to warn, which I think was about 2 years ago, if I'm not memory correct. And I can imagine as you reflect on that moment where psychologists, professionals like yourself, understood this guy is totally off his rocker, and now, 2 years later, what is your perception about what you saw and what you predicted?
Maybe 5 days before this insurrection, I wrote an article in which I used the word insurrection and said that it may be inconceivable to people that this guy would try to initiate a second civil war, but it was also inconceivable to people that Colonel Robert E. Lee, who had actually suppressed an insurrection against slavery, that a couple of years later, or less than 2 years later, he would be leading troops against his own troops. In the same way that people couldn't conceive of it, people can't conceive of it now. And it's not over because the 70,000 psychiatrists and mental health professionals told you just how ill he was. Comparisons were made to the personality of Hitler. It is one of the traits of this personality that they cannot accept defeat. And so, since he can't accept defeat, he thinks that it's being strong to keep resisting. Then what other options does he have? I don't think very many American officers are going to follow him down the road. So the only thing I can think of now is that he might allow a foreign power to, to do the dirty work. And I wouldn't be surprised if one day we have speakers, we see tanks rolling on the street and hear speakers telling us Donald Trumpkovich, the greatest, most wonderful mole that ever existed in the world. Now I'm saying that with my tongue planted deeply in my cheek, but again, over and over, this guy has shown his ability to surprise and the lack of boundaries with respect to acceptable behavior. So it was like, one of the people he pardoned had threatened a civil war if Donald Trump was removed from office. So
I call them Trump's troops because they were ready, male, female, they were ready to just, and I know they were armed, they were ready to do battle. And a lot of these people are, interested and, things that, so it's a very intense situation. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fear that a lot of these Republican senators have, and legislators have of him. They fear his troops. I hate to use that word, but they fear the repercussion that may be visited upon them if they are caught on the opposite side of Donald Trump. So that to me has always been that Trump card, I hate to use that word, that he's held over their head, that look, my thugs may show up at your doorstep if you dare, just like back in the South, where you had this army of racist thugs who would come and terrorize our people and even warn their own people not to do but so much. So unfortunately, that is something that I, perceive. Dr. Shabaka, talk to us about what you saw and your perceptions of what was going on.
We saw what we've been seeing the last 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, which is an unhinged, unrestrained, psychotic man who lies from one minute to the next, and whose ego is so big and inflated that I'm surprised he can even stand up. His head is so big that he can even go through doors. So it's not surprising, it's what we've been getting play by play every day. And the media in the rest of really white America have been, he's a product, but he is also symptomatic of the sickness of this society, because he has almost half the population voted for him. So what does that tell us about the future? This incident is just a culmination of things that's been happening. And this might not be the end, So we have to understand that this was treason, insurrection. These people are totally ill-informed. I mean, they believe that he won. What does that tell us about the psychology of this population? This is the country that boasts about being the leader of democracy. But if you look at its history, it's the greatest suppressor of democracy. Domestically, in terms of what it's done to the Native Americans and African Americans. We talked just a while ago about Georgia in the election. But if you think about it, if Black people had not been terrorized in the South, we would be running several states, because we was terrorized out of there. And there you had the great migrations during World War I and World War II. Okay, it's only now that Black people recently went back into the South, and the vast majority of us are back in the South. Okay, but the suppression still goes on. Gore lost in 2000 by 500 votes in Florida, because the Black vote was suppressed in Florida. They criminalized Black people in Florida, and they took them off the rolls. And the way they did it, they just guessed, oh, that looks like a Black name. We'll take them off the rolls. And that's how he won. That's how Bush won and Gore lost. So this is America.
Let me just say that you raised some excellent points in terms of, as far as we're concerned, that group that I see, like you made some points, 70, over 70, it was almost 50-50, maybe off by 10 million votes. There are people who still, these are the same people who still are bitter about the Civil War. The Civil War, as you know, people were forced to accept, but they never really accepted. I think that's one of the things that we're starting to realize. There's an element in this country that really never fully accepted what the outcome of the Civil War. And I think that mindset is unfortunately still alive. The 45, President Trump actually, I feel, empowered and awakened that, to embolden that mindset to really come forward and to express what we saw. And I think that that's something, like you said, we have to be, to me, something else could happen. Even, I hate to think about it, but even after this man leaves office, you still have that mindset of racism, of entitlement that is still there. And until that is dealt with, which again, this is centuries old, we're not talking about something, that's something that America is going to have to reckon with. And I think the fact that it's shown this ugly head, I know people are embarrassed. We know this as people of African ancestry. We know the reality. But the unfortunate thing is, now I think America has to deal with that bitterness that still exists. Brother Raymond, please share your thoughts about what happened.
Oh, of course. Let me tell you what I saw. I saw that this was telegraphed. This was notified that there was going to, and this was ongoing since basically the elections. and especially since December, it was known that the president, the 45th president of the United States, was going to hold a rally to rile up his, as you call it, the Trump's troops. Okay, everybody knew about it. Let me tell you what I saw. I didn't see much Capitol police protection. I didn't see them prepared. Supposedly, when the mayor of Washington requested National Guards, it was rejected. And, you know, what I see is a lot of hyperbole and theater. It's being called an insurrection and a coup attempt. No, this is media riling up people for viewership, for sponsorship, and also to deflect the reality. Look what happens, Sister Louise, and to our listeners. You know, in 2019, I'm going to give you quick examples. Evo Morales from Bolivia was overthrown in a military coup. The United States publicly informed the whole planet that Morales resigned. 2009, Manuel Zelaya was overthrown in a coup. At the time, the Obama administration let it be known he resigned. You know, this, and then 2004, I was very intimately involved. President Aristide, not only was he overthrown, he was kidnapped by U.S. military and taken out of the country. What was the narrative? It was a resignation. Now, these were 3 legitimate coups. I mean, that's the real description. But they control the narrative. They're being labeled as a resignation. What happened on Wednesday, January 6th? That's nowhere near a coup. There was no military. Nobody was involved. It was citizens who, rightfully or wrongly, believe in their candidate, decided that they were going to express themselves. You had the limited Capitol Police that was there, removing the barricades and welcoming them. I mean, you know, these are all the same people. I mean, I don't understand it. So it was not an insurrection. And this is what's being labeled. Of course, they broke a window, they climbed up, but there were no real weapons. How do we know? If there had been weapons, it would have been used. No, this is, now Trump, yes. I mean, I agree with the psychological assessment. Yeah, of course. But he's a narcissist. All he cares about himself. And he's appealed to those elements who represent close to half the population. And let me add, those elements tend to be white males. In fact, even this previous election, Joe Biden did not win the majority of the white population. In fact, the last Democrat to win the majority white population was Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1964. Jimmy Carter didn't win the majority of the white population. So, you know, I mean, I think unless Black people help the Democratic Party, they can't win an election. But what have we gotten out of it? I'm still waiting for my crumbs. So what am I suggesting? Get involved. Mm-hmm. You know, get involved.
Soraya, what do you think about the police? What the police presence or lack of thereof, and what do you feel the next steps might be to bring this some sense of justice?
I was watching a few programs, and it was brought out that some of the people, the Congress people, had called the governor of Maryland requesting assistance, and he tried to send them, as well as the National Guard that he has control of for Maryland, but he has to ask for permission to go into D.C. He can't just send them. And he called, who was it, the Secretary of Defense, one of those people, one of those Trump appointees, and he was not given permission. And this went on for about an hour and a half. Finally, someone from the Army called and gave him permission. He said that's not really the way it's supposed to go, but he'll take it. And then he sent someone in. So, and also the police, the Capitol Police, which is why it looks like there was a demand for this person being fired, was offered assistance and turned it down because of what was going on. And also, we know that the mayor of DC did ask for the National Guard, and that also was turned down. So it seems to me like this whole thing and this whole riot at the Capitol, these people, the rioters, had help in the fact of police failure to act or even let them in or even take selfies with them, and just allowed them to go in and smash windows and get into people's offices, even get into the Senate chambers. So, I mean, to me, that's a lot of soul searching on the part of the politicians, because how does this look to the world? This is supposed to be the most secure building in the world, and just thugs and low lives and varmints are just able to rush into there and just have their way with the building, and you have to hide under a desk. So, I mean, as far as the police, and of course, Black people saw that. We know that when Black Lives Matter, they were given a heavy hand by the police for the most minimal of things. And yet here you have these people busting in, breaking things. I know one woman was shot, but if Black Lives Matter, how many people would have been shot or killed and certainly arrested? You would have had hundreds of arrests. Here, would they have just a few dozen arrests? So I think more will come of this. As I think the new administration, you're probably going to see more arrests, because now you have different administration and different officials in charge of some type of investigation. But from what everybody could see, I mean, to me, all of us could see, the world could see the discrepancy in the approach of the police when it comes to people of color versus the white people who go, especially these far-right nationalists. So in a way, I think that's something that needed to be seen. That dirty linen needed to be aired.
Dr. McIntosh, you mentioned about Trump and his partner in crime, who you also have written about, Rudy Giuliani, was also stirring the flames as well. Okay. Talk to us about, and again, you've written about this. We all know back when the late Mayor David Dinkins was alive, Rudy Giuliani led a very disgraceful march down the streets of New York. Talk to us about Rudy Giuliani and his role in supporting um, and enabling Trump.
Okay, well, he's another person who has the same, many of the same personality elements as Trump. And during his administration, when you had a Black commissioner of police and a Black mayor, he kind of led a group of rioters. I guess it was at Gracie Mansion. I can't remember whether it was Gracie Mansion or at City Hall. And he did the same type of inflammatory talk to work them up. They were coming from, I think, the St. Patrick's Day parade. But with respect to this thing that happened with Donald Trump, it was an insurrection, because they call a riot of any sorts an insurrection when the people have an objective, like a political objective. The objective was to stop the counting of the votes of the Electoral College. And it was a part of a grander scheme in which Trump had pulled together some people he called alternate electors. And in his mind, if he could intimidate the Congress, if he could intimidate people enough, he could make this strategy, this bizarre strategy that he had concocted to not count the elections. He had 141 Republicans who had agreed to this strategy of blocking the count. And he did block it, but experts had said beforehand, they would probably only be able to delay things for a few hours. With respect to the police response, Noel Leader pointed out today that it had no relationship to their response when a mentally ill woman accidentally drove onto the grounds of the White House. They riddled her car with bullets, and she had a baby in there. They shot her in the back of the head. They killed her. With the Black Lives Matter movement, you saw them shooting rubber bullets at people, gassing people, doing all kinds of things, they even beat up the reporters and the media that was there to report that. So the response was nothing like it. But an insurrection it was. It wasn't a coup d'etat, But what I would say is, that's why I said before, you don't know that it's finished. This guy is very grandiose, and you don't know what he would try. And the fact that he has, in the same way that Hitler did, he has some people who are souped up behind some phony and crazy kinds of beliefs. You know, you can have an insurrection. In fact, also has been shown that the American military and the police are heavily infiltrated by the most right-wing elements of this government. People probably laughed at John Brown, you know, when he, you know, but these kinds of things, they won't necessarily end on the 20th when Biden is supposed to be inaugurated. They are harbinger of things that he's threatened for a long time, and there's a lot of crazies that are along with him.
You know, I think that we've really discussed a lot of food for thought. And, you know, this is an ongoing conversation as we move into a new administration in the new year. What does this mean for us as people of African ancestry? How will we hold our government accountable? How will we hold politicians accountable? And what will we to ensure that, you know, the work and the support that we've given throughout the years is rewarded in some level. But going back to this mark in a moment in American history, I just want to say that I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate you sharing, and we certainly welcome our guests, our audience, to share your thoughts about today's program. But with that said, I want to thank you all for joining us. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. And please visit our website at www.ccptv.org. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you. To support these broadcasts, we encourage you to send contributions to P.O. Box 300851, Jamaica, New York 11430. Thank you.
This broadcast of Cultural Caravan is paid for by Cultural Caravan Productions Incorporated.